GM everyone. Welcome to another Pinto Town Hall. Uh, this is obviously a very exciting town hall as the system has reached its value target again after a number of months, about 3 months plus, maybe even 4 months below the value target. And the system seems to be crossing the value target regularly. So there was $1 million purchase of Pinto a couple days ago, and since then the system has oscillated back down to 80 cents, but pretty quickly came back to the value target and now seems to be growing slowly. The APYs are up, and in line with the system being highly reflexive, this is the most populated town hall that we've had in quite some time. So excited to have everyone here. For those that are not acquainted with the typical way that we do this, uh, we typically go around and hear from each of the contributors what they're working on, what they're thinking about. Then we open it up for questions and comments and people to speak freely. And then typically, if there's time remaining, I talk a little bit about my perspective on the system as well. So we're going to keep in line with that schedule. But I do want to say this is a very exciting time for the system, and it's great to have everyone here. So with that being said, going to kick it off to Frijo. How are you doing, sir?
Doing good, doing good. It's always a good day on the farm. Uh, the highest thing I'm working on right now is implementing a uh, upgrade to the current convert down penalty system. We've had numerous discussions around the week, and we decided that uh, it would be a good idea to work on a convert down penalty that is, in certain situations, more aggressive. I actually think you would be a great person to explain why we decided to go this route and uh, what makes it more aggressive. But at a high level, maybe to explain the mechanism itself. Currently, the convert down penalty ranges from 100% to zero immediately after the system has crossed the value target. Uh, and performs a logarithmic decay over time. I think it takes around 12 seasons or so. We wanted to add an addition constraint such that the penalty is 100% up to some price until some amount of Pinto is issued. That amount of Pinto is a function of the time Pinto has spent below its value target and increases by some percent of the supply. The final numbers are still being tweaked, but that's the general idea of what we want to do. So I'll kick it out to you, Ben. I want on to the why we decided to do this.
Sure. Thank you, Frijo. So the TLDR is this has been a long-standing debate within the Beanstalk community and now the Pinto community around whether all down converts are healthy for the system. And in particular, there's a trade-off between enabling downward converts in order to preserve liquidity and penalizing downward converts in order to maximize growth. And historically, the winning mindset, which I've been a backer of, has been that the meta is to maximize the preservation of liquidity at all costs. However, what we've observed during previous repeggings or re-reachings of the value target is that often excessive downward converts ends up killing the upward momentum or the positive momentum of the system. And the result is that the system isn't able to escape its debt cycle in an efficient fashion. And fundamentally, particularly in these early stages, but even more generally, the the idea behind increasing the efficacy or the strength of the penalty is that in certain instances, particularly after an extended period of time below the value target, it may be in the system's best interest in order to grow uh, or at least minimize the amount of downward converts very, very close to peg in order to facilitate some growth in order to improve the health of the system from a debt level perspective. So there's a trade-off between preserving liquidity per se and growing a bit to improve the health of the system, paying off debt, demonstrating creditworthiness. And whereas historically, we've basically made the trade-off to always preserve liquidity at the maximum. Recently, we introduced this convert down penalty, which, as you mentioned, Frio, effectively makes it such that for 12, until there are 12 consecutive, or it's slightly different than that, but until there are 12 seasons uh, above the value target, there is a penalty for converting down. And it starts at 100%. And for each additional season that progresses, that penalty comes down, as you said, logarithmically until a 0% penalty. And this is a start. But upon reflection, there does seem to be, uh, given that we're already moving in the direction of a convert down penalty, there does seem to be additional merit to taking the penalty further in the interest of giving the system an opportunity to grow slowly, not aggressively. So the idea, as you suggested, is to put a price cap. We're currently thinking half a cent above the value target, 1005, where below that price, convert downs are penalized 100% until some supply growth is reached. And after that supply growth, we would expect the convert down penalty as it's currently implemented to kick in even below that threshold, such that there could be a convert penalty after the system sort of grows its way out of the debt cycle that it's in any particular instance. And then, of course, above that threshold of 1005, the pre existing convert penalty will continue to exist. So the thinking behind this is that within a very close range of the value target, we talk about low volatility money. That level of upward volatility is acceptable to the system. And while you can make an argument that the system, if there's no downward converts, uh, it shouldn't print at all, and there should be no increase in the supply. Ultimately, if there is still an opportunity every season for newly minted Pinto to be sold, and so I don't think it's fair to say that there's no increase in supply that can't be sold, or that there's no ability to sell. It's just that the converts within the silo are minimized, or the incentive is not to convert, in order to see if the system is able to basically grow its way out of the debt cycle that it currently finds itself in. While it's unclear if it will work, if you will, such that introducing such a penalty would make it such that the system is able to basically print its way out of debt, which is a very interesting concept. Uh, and it's not just printing its way out of debt, because it's like the circumstances have to be right. There still has to be no supply that wants to leave the system entirely below a dollar, or even below $1.50 a cent. But if that is the case, the system is basically saying the value that remains within the silo that is banking on the system growing in the future, that value should not be able to minimize the extent to which the system can grow exclusively in interest to preserve more liquidity. So it's a really interesting and quite a significant departure from the long-standing monetary policy that I've been an advocate of, which is to say that the system, when there's low liquidity and it's been in a debt cycle, should be incredibly conservative and preserve liquidity at all whenever possible, or at least make it such that if any participant whatsoever, wanted to convert downward, they could. Uh, this is a departure from that and takes the opinion of perhaps it's possible to use properly parameterized uh, policy to actually put the system in a position to grow. Again, if the preconditions are right, to grow its way out of the hole that it currently finds itself in. So with that, then the question becomes, well, what is the supply threshold under which it would make sense for the system to basically try to do this until? And there is a bit of napkin math here, because there's no right answer. But we're basically thinking, you want the system to really grow out of whatever debt cycle it's in. Uh, in our case, uh, that would be something like $100 million supply, maybe slightly less, but just around that, because you double the pod supply, and then you add the current Pinto supply, you get to around 90 million. And so we use round numbers. We say like 100 million. But the point is, in order for the system to grow its way out of the dead cycle, it would really have to grow to 100 million supply. And the thinking is roughly if we did something like a 1% increase in supply for every day, and then we'd actually do it, based on a season. So 1% a day divided by 24 seasons in a day. But the point is, we're basically thinking we would do 1% supply increase for every day that the system spends below the value target consecutively. And this would basically be like a high water mark that goes up over time. The longer the system is within a dead cycle, potentially up to some cap. But for now, we're not thinking about implementing a cap, but you could, in theory, implement a cap to this supply increase. But up until that high water mark of supply is hit, the converts down below $1.50 would not be allowed without 100% penalty. So that's the current thinking. It's a bit aggressive from a policy perspective, but it's also a tremendously interesting experiment. And it feels like tremendously valuable to get data on whether it's possible for, if you set the system up properly, given the right preconditions, if it's possible to really incentivize growing out of that debt cycle. And in our case, the current debt cycle. So I'm very interested in this change. It's been advocated, I think, quite heavily by Blur in the main chat. I found a lot of it to be very insightful and thought-provoking. And ultimately, I think we should be more aggressive in our consideration of different policies to really get the maximum out of this experiment. And so I'm very excited about this change. It's something we've talked about. I know Ford Pinto's advocated for something like this for a very long time. But I think we find ourselves in a really interesting position with Pinto. And at this point, I think it's a great idea to try it out. So that's the explanation of what Pinto asked me to explain, and happy to answer any questions if people have before we kick it back to Frijo.
You mentioned that this is kind of like printing your way out of a debt cycle, but I think that's a little bit overly, I don't know, maybe dramatic is not the right word, but perhaps a bit of an exaggeration because there's, again, no restrictions for anyone to leave the system at any time at all. Rather, you can view it as just reducing the tragedy of the commons that happens as soon as we got over the price target. So before, it's funny because even the people who were the longest believers that wanted, that were sure that the system was going to grow over the long period of time, they were the ones down converting and stopping the system from growing, which was definitely a tragedy of the commons problem, I would say. So they actually didn't want, overall to stop the growth, but they also wanted the individual thing, which was to have more seats than everybody else. So that's how I view it, but I know that other people view it differently. But yeah, great to hear your color on it.
Thanks for chiming in there, Ford. Yeah, I think that's a very nuanced and valid perspective. Thank you very much for sharing. All right, so obviously anyone can chime in on this front at any time, but particularly during the open period of this town hall. But gonna kick it back to Frijo if there's anything else you wanted to mention before we keep swinging it around to the other contributors.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Still making progress on the convert up bonus. That's still a high priority for us. In particular, I've been working with various contributors to also make good progress on the UI front. Given the mechanism of the convert bonus, we're gonna need to have a convert order book style blueprint similar to what we did with the sewing. The field for reference was quite unusable between the time of the upgrade and the ability to sew via the blueprints. So we're gonna make sure we minimize that time, make sure we have a very clean and very easy to use UX when interacting with the silo for converting up. So that's my second priority at the moment.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Frijo. Anything else you want to mention?
I think that's all on my end.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, default juice, swinging it to you. How are you doing, sir?
Doing good, doing good. So last week I mentioned I was working on the mow, plant, and harvest blueprint for tractor, which will automate, obviously mowing, planting, and harvesting for farmers, so they can just like sign the blueprint, log out, and don't have to claim their pintos and harvest their pods every season as they come. And this is now finished, and I expect it to be deployed after it's been reviewed. But in general, farmers can just like log out, sign this blueprint, and just see their balance grow when they come back. Besides that, I'm working on upgrading our monitoring and alerting systems, especially for security reasons. So, like as you most of you know, Beanstalk's not failure but hardship came from a security incident. So this time around, we're leaving no stone unturned. And yeah, after that, I'll be implementing the beanstalk shipments, which is the beanstalk repayment mechanisms. Um, so as you might or might not know, Pinto has allocated 3% of its future supply after 1 billion to all beanstalk participants. And that needs to be codified somehow. So I'll be working on that, which was a core promise of the protocol since deployment. Um, but yeah, among other stuff, this is where I'm at.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, I think in line with what you and Frio were saying, all of this work on tractor in order to make it such that people can farm in an automated fashion is a really big upgrade to the system. So thank you for all the work you're doing there, and of course on the security front, incredibly important stuff. Um, the the color there is that the secure beanstalk upgrade, which made some really major upgrades to the security of the system, ultimately due to the internal nature of pods within the system, that wasn't covered. And so we're working with Hypernative, who we already have a pre-existing security integration with, to make sure that there's additional monitoring on the pods. So that's the additional color for those that are interested. And very grateful to you, Default Juice, for all the work you're doing to make sure that the whole system is as secure as possible. All right. Who should we kick it to next? Speaking of all the tractor stuff, Floyd Rainweather, how are you, sir?
Yo, how we doing? How you doing, sir?
I'm great, brother. I'm great. Thank you very much. Talk to us. What's on your mind? What are you cooking up?
Um, on my end, I've been working on the landing page, of course. There's been some pretty good progress there. Um, but recently, thanks to this, increased activity, some issues on the page on the UI have been brought up. So I've been working on those, addressing those as they come. And I'm gonna let everyone know if you think something could be better in the UI, or if you find an issue or a bug, let us know. We're always looking uh, for things that need to be done. And if you find an issue, post in the kitchen, in the front end channel or the design channel, doesn't matter. We'll log it and we'll fix it eventually. So there's been some pretty great feedback in the past couple days, and very excited to get this fixed and make the app even better.
Awesome. Thank you for that update, sir. All right. Why don't we kick it over to Blur? How are you doing? Nice to have you here.
And GM. Um, for me, I have been working on the convert order book UX, just making sure, all the designs, I mean, the design that we create will fit the user's needs and that it's also intuitive. And so, things that go in that is the forms, trying to figure out what are the parameters that people need to set, and then also what are the charts and data that people need to know, people need to see. So yeah, I mean, just chugging along on that, and also want to echo what Floyd Rainweather said on the front end. You know, if there's any bugs, just let us know, and we try to get to it as soon as possible.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Burr. Yeah, we have quite a team ready for as the the usage of the site increases. If people come across any issues or rough edges, obviously the entire user experience has increased dramatically in complexity with the introduction of Tractor and stuff. So if people run into any issues, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're working on creating a more anonymous forum for bug reports. Currently, the Discord we have a channel that anytime there's any sort of errors on the front end, those get auto reported. But we're also trying to create a pipeline for anyone that wants to manually report without doxing themselves, even under like a pseudonym, such that we can maximize the amount of comfort people have in producing bug reports. So that'll be live hopefully sometime this week. But that's I think that's it from the front end guys at the moment. All right, why don't we swing it over to Pinticito? Actually, before we go to Pinticito, Pinto Pirate, I see you're here. How are you doing?
GM, everybody, indeed. Well, I would say what I've been working on, another thing I don't think we brought up yet in this call that's been discussed that we're exploring is de-whitelisting the Solana pool. And so I've been getting things ready on the middleware side if that change is to happen. So that's stuff between the bots, the subgraphs, and our API. So yeah, I think that's like pretty much ready at this point. Hopefully, the idea is if that change moves forward, that we won't have obviously any service disruptions to those services. So I think we're good there. There might still be some more changes that need to happen across the UI, but we'll see. And then yeah, I guess beyond that, like some other stuff to look out for. I know there's been some suggestions for different data points in the Discord over like the last week or so. I forget who it was, but someone was talking about the down convert penalty chart. I think that'd be really interesting. So maybe we'll get something for that going. And I think there was another one about the APYs for Pinto, which yeah, we should have all that data. We just have to figure out how to show it. So good stuff to come, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Pinto Pirate.
Yeah, and I'll just mention too, I don't know if we made if there was ever an announcement made, but there are a couple of new charts that were added to the data page, I think earlier this week. The one that shows the performance of all the different crypto assets that Pinto trades against, and just kind of comparing the performance like of all of them against each other, both like in terms of their price and like percentage change. That's on the main data page for Pinto if you scroll to the bottom. So yeah, I would encourage you guys to check that out. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. That is really exciting stuff. Those charts are really informative. I'd encourage everyone to check them out. Thank you very much, Pinto Pirate. Yeah, I think maybe the only thing to comment on the de-whitelisting Sol thing is this has been really it's one of the hardest things to do is to figure out how to do the liquidity allocation stuff properly and how to allocate seed gauge points and effectively manage the liquidity properly. But given the current market, it feels like ETH has really caught a bid from TradFi, and it just feels like Sol is not in the same boat at the moment. So given the protocols on base, feels like a prudent decision, at least for the time being, particularly when you layer in the fact that the lack of wrapped Sol, or I guess wormhole Sol, on base outside the basin is so low that the protocol is actually experiencing a lot of friction as a result. So, yeah, I don't think there's too much to say on that front. Over time, we'd like to figure out how to open up that those policy making decisions to the group, while obviously not having like a group trading thing affect the state of the system, because as we all know, group trading is a money losing venture. So this has been for years now an open problem that we've talked about, and at this point we're still at the point where we just have to make some executive decisions on that front. So not the best or not the meta that we want in the long run, but seems like a wise decision at the moment. All right, it's funny. I'm here and I'm seeing the notifications come in. I think we just saw someone harvest and deposit. So shout out to whoever did that. That is what bull runs are made of. And then I think I also saw a big withdrawal come through, which is not what bull runs are made of, but that is the beauty of a liquid system like this, is people can come and go as they please. You go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to deposit into S Pinto, but saw the crate balance.
Yikes, man. That's not good. I don't think you need to withdraw to do that. So I think I would maybe Burr, can you reach out to 1KKI and help them do this properly, and then also maybe ask them about how the UI directed them in such a way where they thought the meta was to withdraw instead of just do it into S Pinto? Because I think these are the frictions that now that we're getting more activity, we want to make sure that the UI really directs people as best as possible to do the efficient thing, which, given the complexity of the system, is not so easy to do. So thanks for saying that, 1KKI. Sorry to hear that the UI is still not super smooth.
Yeah, like
but don't mind.
For reference, our ultimate goal is that every action a user takes should take one transaction. In theory, the S Pinto contract is configurable such that you'll be able to transfer your deposits and retain the stock. But yeah, we are doing our greatest on our end to make sure that's the case. So, any of these bugs, please let us know, please.
It is possible to do. Actually, if you flip on use Pinto deposits on the S Pinto page, then it'll let you select from your existing deposits, so you don't have to withdraw.
Just see it. I think I'm blind.
Well, the meta point is that KKI should automatically have that button on. Like, we should try to minimize these decisions for the user as soon, as much as we can.
Thanks, Frijo. And thanks for saying hello, 1KKI. It's nice to have you here.
You see the deposits. A man of his word.
Totally.
In real time. This is crazy.
The vibes are good here. The vibes are good here. All right. Is Pintocito still here? I think so. How are you doing, sir?
I'm here. I waited patiently after I was sort of blue balled, and I'm excited to share. I'm happy to see a packed town hall this week. On my end, obviously just taking into account the fact that we've been growing a bit and getting some new activity in the protocol, want to exactly on this issue try to make sure that the UI is as smooth as possible. So kind of commencing a deep dive into all of the user flows to make sure that it's as intuitive as possible. I've already been working on updating some of the language in the notifications to clarify for people the consequences of certain actions that they would take in order to just make it intuitive and seamless for them, as well as keeping them informed without added complexity. So my intention is to go through with a couple of the other contributors, all of the user flows, and just make sure that it's as it should be and reasonable, so that people don't, especially if more money starts getting thrown around, make very consequential decisions in a way that's not intended. Beyond that, talking about just producing more content, we made a little bit of a content roadmap so that for new people coming into the system, they can just quickly learn about it, digest it, and start interacting with it from an educated perspective quickly. So hope to get that out pretty soon. And yeah, hoping to get more active on socials, and especially as there's a lot of activity happening in the system, want to keep people posted on what's going on and what we're thinking about it, just to try to generate more conversation on Twitter, mainly, to show people that things are happening here, because it's a very exciting time, and we feel like we want to try to make the conversation accessible to people, and just give people a heads up that there's a lot being talked about and happening. So those are the kind of things I'm thinking about right now.
Awesome. Thanks for that update. And I see the S Pinto wrap. So 1KKI, well done. Sorry for the friction, but we're all learning here. Appreciate you very much. All right, so I think maybe the best thing to do now is to open up the floor for a bit and see if there's anything on people's minds, see if people want to share, see what people want to talk about. Obviously, it's a very interesting time on the farm. So with that, the floor is open as we cross the value target times 3,100. So cool time to be on the farm, in my opinion. Floor is open.
I just wanted to shout out that
Hey.
in addition to whitelisting or de-whitelisting Wormhole Soul, we were also discussing combining the CB ETH and the ETH pools together. Historically, as you have more pools trading against the asset, it increases its surface area for MEV. Given that there seems to be few advantages of having a separate ETH pool, it seems like a good time to also consolidate these two together. Wanted to shout that out before we open the floor.
Thanks, Frijo. Mighty Misanthrope, I saw you unmute. GM, sir.
Yeah, do you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, hello everyone. Glad to be here for the first time and to also witness the protocol reaching its target. That was a very sensational moment. I have one question. Given the current legal landscape around stable coins and crypto regulation, I know this is an early stage, but I'm wondering if there is any relating to new regulation affecting the Pinto protocol in the future. So, for example, the recently enacted Genius Act created a regulatory framework for traditionally backed stablecoins. It didn't address any regulations regarding algorithmic stablecoins, but in part of the act, it directs the Department of the Treasury to conduct a study on endogenous collateralized stablecoins. So I read some of the reports around this. So any thoughts on that?
Generally, I try not to comment on the legal side of things, but from my perspective, the passing of the Genius Act was a pretty big deal for our space and seems to definitely green light, obviously with certain restrictions, what people traditionally refer to as stable coins. It doesn't seem like the language has any direct effect on our work because it doesn't fit into the scope of what the Genius Act was talking about with respect to stable coins. But I think it's a good sign generally that we're getting a lot more clarity so that more people can feel comfortable in our space. But candidly, my main thing is that the whole reason why Pinto needs to exist and why the work that we're doing on algo stables is so important is ultimately because all of these traditional collateralized stable coins, if you will, that get their value at this point primarily from US treasuries, these are fundamentally centralized in nature. And so insofar as our goal as a community within crypto is to create a censorship resistant, permissionless, and trustless economy, an entire economy, we've seen quite clearly a demand for a medium of exchange and unit of account, right? USDC, USDT, and all these other stables are tremendously popular. The market is demanding that. But due to their nature of requiring a centralized custodian and also fundamentally being in practice controlled by the government, it really does compromise the entire integrity of the crypto space from my perspective. And so to me, the real thing that's playing out is our work has become even more important, where it's like as the US government comes to terms with stablecoins and creates a framework such that all of these stablecoin operators can become compliant in an official way. What that really says to me is that our work is more necessary than ever, that the need for a permissionless, censorship resistant, and trustless medium of exchange and unit of account has never been greater. And I'm incredibly grateful, in particular, for the work of the people at Coin Center, who, if people are in a position to donate, I'd highly encourage you to donate there. They were really fighting tooth and nail to make sure that our work is protected, and that the language in the Genius Act was not such that we are limited or restricted in our ability to experiment here at the frontier of money. So huge shout out to them. I'm really grateful for their work. I feel like it's directly affected the outcome here. And yeah, that's my main takeaway. Like, on the one hand, great to see that the space is maturing and getting adopted. On the other hand, that really makes it even more necessary for our work to come to fruition and come to reality, if you will. I think it makes our work even more necessary that we have to figure out a way to make this work. And I'm really grateful that the way the bill came out, it didn't put a kibosh or increase the risk of what we're doing here, at least from a legal perspective. Of course,
Yeah.
economically, there's a lot of risk.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Of course. Thank you for your question. The floor is open. Boom, a 5,000 new deposit. Life is so much better at the value target than at 33 cents. Even though I know last week I was still saying things are good, things are much better here at the value target.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Happy value target, everybody. Glad to see the town halls filled. And exciting over here. I kind of had two ideas that have been floating around. I'm curious if people have talked about a bit more. There's been a lot of discussion about what assets are being incentivized in the pools, specifically delisting the SOL, maybe potentially combining ETH. The other thing that I wanted to bring up that I've talked with some other people were adding an asset that had some sort of neutral or negative, I guess not negative, but like opposite interaction with crypto direction. Assets like gold, for example, that when considering the general crypto market trends, trades at a very different angle. I think these assets are sort of interesting to help counterbalance the direction of the pools in terms of what assets Pinto is paired with and what we're incentivizing as a way to counterbalance like any opposite market direction, or as things might trend back into a bear market at some point. Pinto as a protocol could maybe still be somewhat more protected in those downward curves. So I think it's interesting to consider things like gold, and I don't know what else fits in that category. So I'm curious if people have thoughts on what the implementation, what other assets might fit that kind of category, and how that might work in the Pinto protocol. And then my other thing, which is high benefit, is considering how much Coinbase is incentivizing Base. They're introducing the way to trade, all Base tokens on like big dexes on like the Coinbase, or I guess now the Base app. So another interesting idea that I was thinking about was a S Pinto / USDC or something similar, like normal DEX pool that exists in a more accessible DEX that could be surfaced on like the Coinbase app, or like the Coinbase app. And that could be a way to maybe introduce and onboard people to have an easier time accessing like the Pinto ecosystem by just directly being able to purchase S Pinto, on the Coinbase app theoretically. Obviously, like that would have to be figured out based on the implementation of what Coinbase actually does, but something that I'm thinking about, and I'm wondering what the team and other people think about that specifically. So those are the two things: just alternative assets in the silo, and potentially like an S Pinto paired pool that's like not on the Pinto exchange. Curious about the thoughts about those two things.
Well, I'll start with the second question, which is that I think it's a really interesting idea, particularly from a distribution perspective. S Pinto has this great property where it has the ERC20 fungibility while still receiving a good amount of the yield from the silo. The one thing is, it's not the most efficient way to use the system, and S Pinto really is such an abstraction that it's not. My expectation was like if someone's buying the S Pinto from the Coinbase app, they're really not going to engage with the ecosystem, at least early on, until maybe they start receiving a significant yield and are like, whoa, where's this coming from? And so from that perspective, I think we just want to be cautious about when to play that card, if you will. Like at a $10 million market cap, my instinct is that we're better off being slightly more conservative, trying to get to maybe an order of magnitude bigger, if you will, with more dedicated farmers that are in touch with the system and understand what's going on, that can form a more cohesive base of support for the protocol before we try to break it out for more of the normies, if you will. So I think it's a very strong idea. This is one of the beauties of S Pinto, is that it really is composable with the existing state-of-the-art stuff that isn't necessarily built to support Pinto. But I think it's a matter of trying to do that at the right time once the protocol is sort of strong enough to support like true retail, not paying attention but wanting to participate in the system. So yeah, I would say generally I like the idea, and this is something that we definitely want to do, but not necessarily today as soon as the system has started to grow. Maybe once we're out of this debt cycle and things are in a materially better circumstance, that would be the right time, in my opinion. But I think it's a very strong suggestion. With respect to the other value in the silo, first with respect to the gold, I don't know how unique gold is or uncorrelated from the crypto markets gold is, because I believe Bitcoin and gold do trade somewhat in a correlated fashion as a risk-off asset, although they're definitely not perfectly coupled. And then, of course, the rest of crypto generally tracks Bitcoin with a decent correlation as well. So I don't know if something with gold, like gold, you're really going to get an alternate exposure. I almost feel like maybe stocks, you get better exposure. But of course, with gold or stocks, assets that really don't exist natively on chain, you're going to be taking additional custodial risk, where in practice, basically all of these assets are going to have some centralized point of censorship. So the protocol does accept some level of risk by having a USDC pool, but the thought there is there's a tremendous benefit in terms of the utility of the protocol and the utility of the coin from introducing a stable pool with a stable swap constant product and a stable swap invariant instead of the constant product invariant. And so it's like that's a trade-off that is okay to some extent. I guess you could make an argument that we have like CBETH and CBBTC, so there's already a lot of centrally custodied and potentially censorable assets. But I feel like to the extent that we can move away from that stuff and try to take on yield-bearing assets that are digitally native, network native, that's more the direction that we want to take stuff. But at the same time, the reality is if Pinto is to serve as a medium of exchange across the entire economy, ultimately we would expect a significant amount of the assets that it trades against to be, these centrally wrapped exogenous value assets. So it's a really interesting dynamic to play with, like how much of the silo liquidity are we comfortable with having exposure to any custodian, any one custodian? How do we play that against the volatility of those assets and their correlation to one another? This is, as I was sort of alluding to earlier, a portfolio management question, which is for those that follow markets, which I assume a lot of people here do, know that portfolio management is one of the most difficult games to play and one of the most competitive games to play. And so at some level, creating the right system that is both permissionless and censorship resistant, and allows for the participants in Pinto to effectively control which assets they want to control and deposit which assets they want to within the silo, while still having some overarching meta level portfolio management protocol in place for the protocol, is really not so simple to do. It's not so simple to do in general, even if we weren't trying to do it in a censorship resistant and trustless and permissionless fashion, because of how difficult portfolio management is. But then when you layer on the fact that we want to do it in line with the values of the protocol, it becomes an increasingly difficult problem. So I guess this is to say, like, a real solution to the problem you're talking about is a ways away. And therefore, my instinct is that simple is better. And we don't necessarily want to get into the business of picking and choosing and customizing a portfolio that is complex. So in some sense, like, less is more at this point in time. So some ETH exposure, particularly, we want some sort of yield on top of that. ETH makes a lot of sense to me. We do probably want some stablecoin exposure as well. If we make it a yield bearing one, particularly a non-rebasing one, which is what basing currently supports, you do sort of lose the ability to have stable swap, which is an interesting consideration. But the point is, I think beyond that, maybe you add in some BTC exposure, which we currently have. I don't know, you get Bitcoin, you get ETH, you get some USD stablecoins. Feels like a pretty good portfolio to me, given that we don't want to get into the portfolio management business. But at some point in the future, I think, that would be a real end, if you will, to this problem, would be to put in some sort of larger portfolio management meta protocol in place. But doing it properly is a real challenge given the values of the protocol.
Okay, I appreciate the depth in exploring that topic. That a lot of things make sense to me. The part of wanting to understand what assets we pair with in the silo comes from kind of watching the current debt cycle kind of expand, especially when the market kind of reversed the first time during this bull cycle. And seeing the impact on the protocol kind of gave some inspiration to see, okay, what are we paying in the silo, and what are ways that we can maybe explore that. I think I do agree with the risks of pairing with the silo. Like, I think that generally makes sense to me. And I think simplification, especially with combining the ETHs and getting rid of Sol, is a really good way to keep it very stupid simple in terms of what goes in there. But I do think that some sort of way for the protocol to not struggle so much in a bear market is something to consider. So maybe if that's not the way, then I'm curious what other ways, and that's probably like a larger conversation. So, anyways, thanks for my floor time. I'll go ahead and let someone else take the mic.
I appreciate you, Mo-chan, and maybe I would just say, like, maybe the canonical problem in my mind is that in portfolio management during the bear market, that's actually when you want to be buying the assets that are in the bear market, at least to some extent, right? So the ETH price comes down. You don't want to be a seller of ETH when the market comes down, right? Typically, if you want to make money trading and managing a portfolio, you want to buy low and sell high. So sort of counterintuitively, the thing that we want to figure out how to do is to get the protocol to actually sort of take risk-off actions when the market is pumping and getting really hot, and incentivize a conversion from some of the depositors from holding the volatile assets that are growing and changing that into like a stable coin, for example. And then vice versa, when the market is taking a dump, that's actually the time when the protocol wants to figure out how to incentivize taking the stable assets and then purchasing the volatile assets with them. So this is really where the difficulty comes in. It's like, yeah, during the bear market, we want to figure out how to preserve liquidity, but that actually is counterintuitively like directly opposed to the idea of doing strong portfolio management. So this is why it's such a complex problem to do it properly. All right, the floor is open again. Going once. Going twice. All right, so I'm going to we have about 5 minutes left in this town hall. We can always run over if people have some more stuff to say. But I'm going to hop in. Oh, what's up, Blur? How we doing?
We're doing good.
Any thoughts? I know you've had some very interesting comments in the general chat. Curious if you had anything you wanted to talk about.
No, not really. I've just got back from a meeting, so I'm happy to sort of listen for a minute, and maybe I'll pitch in if it makes sense to
Cheers. Well, you're just catching the tail end of this whole thing, but feel free to chime in at any moment. So I was just going to say, as sort of some closing remarks to this, we're at a really interesting point in time as a protocol. On the one hand, the protocol is still small and has a pretty low L2SR. Like, even the return to the value target has not increased the straight health of the protocol, if you will. Like, if you evaluate health from a debt level and liquidity level perspective, the protocol is really in a similar spot. But obviously, from a price perspective and a value target perspective, the protocol is doing much better and has started to grow as a result. And particularly when you layer in this change that we're planning on making with respect to the converts, it does seem like we are at a real opportunity with respect to the protocol, where the general sentiment within the crypto market is very positive. Even a couple days ago, I was starting to see tweets about, like, it's almost time some idiot tries to create an algorithmic stable coin. And of course, I had a good laugh at that because I am that idiot. And the punchline of all of this is, I really do think it's an important time for those of us that have stuck around and those of us that really care about Pinto as a protocol and care about this whole idea of trying to create a censorship-resistant, permissionless, trustless medium of exchange and unit of account, that this is a big moment for us. And ultimately, I do believe that what will play out over the next 3 to 6 months with this protocol will hopefully set the stage and the tone for a larger discussion within the crypto community about, it really is time for us to reconsider algo stables. I gave a talk about this in Cannes about a month ago, and I think it's actually not so grating to people as it might have been a year or two ago. The pain from the Terra collapse, and to a lesser extent, the Beanstalk collapse for people, I guess the Beanstalk exploit is better to say, seems to have faded enough such that people are willing to reconsider our work and reconsider our protocol. And so I would just encourage everyone to recognize that this is an important time. And insofar as they are able to, in an authentic way, I don't think shilling this thing is the right way to do it. I think it's much more of an honest, authentic, hey, we think this is worth people to consider. This is an experiment. Nothing here is promised, certainly. This is the frontier of money. And we don't know if this particular version of the model is good enough to sustain itself in perpetuity. Maybe even more so, like, even the perfect model might not be able to sustain itself in perpetuity without a social acceptance, without socially people agreeing that this is necessary and that this is currently the best version that we have. I think it's really important that we, as much as possible as a community, try to get the word out there that this has been an ongoing thing, that despite the craziness from 3 years ago, work has continued. And this really is the latest, greatest state-of-the-art model, and it deserves to have an opportunity to see the light of day, for people to give it consideration, and for us to get a lot more information about, well, how good is this thing? I can't say that there are no improvements that come to mind for how we can make this thing better, but the truth is they're not so big. They're marginal improvements. And for that reason, I think it is the right time in many ways. Perhaps a serendipity might even be a good word, that the universe has set up the conditions where, just as the protocol is getting to a point, and obviously, as we were talking about earlier in this town hall, the UI still has some rough edges. So much so that one KKI, made that stock losing maneuver. So there's definitely still some rough edges, but I think we'll be able to buff those out, particularly if we're able to get more and more feedback from users on the UI. But it really does feel like a great opportunity for us to learn a lot more about the protocol, to get a lot more data as we continue to experiment at the frontier of money. So I just wanted to express my gratitude for people, to people, for sticking around, for those that continue to contribute, for those that continue to participate in the Discord. But now really does feel like a great time. And listen, we may still have someone leave, for $1 million or $500,000, and the price may come back down for a bit. So I think we shouldn't get lost in the volatility. I think we need to all come together and recognize this is a really potentially powerful moment for algo stables in general. And we really do have the state of the art here. So, that's my evaluation on where we're at. And I'm hopeful that, for those of you that maybe follow my Twitter, you see I've been a bit more aggressive with my posting about all this stuff recently, but not just over the past couple of days, but over the past week or two, because it really does feel like the market conditions are changing substantively, and it's almost time that the market is really going to start looking for stuff like this again. So that's my call to action for us to, in an authentic way, to really get the word out there that this is happening, and hopefully that will benefit all of us and benefit the protocol. So that's what I got for people. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to open it up one more time to see if there's anything else anyone wants to comment on. But otherwise, we'll talk again this time next week. Yeah, go ahead.
You did happen to mention feedback on the UI, and there just so happens to be a survey that you can use to drop any and every comment that you may have about the UI and UX. And we're continuing to gather responses. It's been a success so far. It's completely anonymous, so hopefully that allays some fears about that. But yeah, please do just share it as widely as possible. It really is tough to come up with a good UI for a protocol as novel as Pinto in a black box without feedback from the outside world, without feedback from our actual users, from new users, from old users. It's so difficult to do that. So every response really, really helps. We've had some lovely responses so far with lots of detail, lots of short answer detail, really trying to help us figure out how to visualize these complex new mechanics of an algo stable, and all of that. So yeah, please do. I just dropped it in the chat again. I'll drop it in the general chat. But give it a thought. Give it some thought. It really does help to have that feedback.
To tack on with the survey, I still really recommend the top with kind of like announcement bar on top of the Pinto website should link to the survey maybe as like maybe for like a week or something, be like, hey, like this is a survey if you want to help explore the UX of the protocol, just as a way to onboard other people like that are in the Discord would be really
It's a
nice.
great idea. I don't know why we haven't done that already. We should get on that.
Great. Thanks for that idea, Mo-Chen. We'll be sure to make that happen soon. All right, gonna leave the floor open for another minute if there's anyone else that wants to comment or chime in.
One Billy, let's go.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to say, it's been a rough year. We launched, or I guess this launched on the eve of one of the most brutal crashes certainly I've seen. I've been doing this a long time, and that slightly sort of scuppered us for a while. But I think the model will speak for itself. I've been doing this a very long time, almost 8 years now, and in that time, there have been few things that I've looked at that have filled me with as much sort of childish intrigue as this. And for that alone, I think it's worth pushing it and trying to make it run. And I think that the model, when it starts running, is one that just really does run. So looking forward to the next few months with you guys and seeing where we can take this.
Hell yeah. It is a marathon, not a sprint, folks. Remember that. What's up, Quasi Matt? See, you're unmuted. You got anything you wanted to share before we wrap this up?
My bad. I'm supposed to be muted.
All good, brother. Good to have you here. All right, folks, going to leave this open for just another minute, and then we'll wrap it up. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. The energy here is tremendous. It's great to see how people are coming together around this thing doing well. Really fills me with tremendous joy. And looking forward to continuing to figure all this out together. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Peace out.
Thank you, Ben.